I never should have tested it at midnight. But deadlines are unforgiving, especially when you're a solo developer trying to create the next-gen VR horror experience. Graveyard Shift was supposed to be my magnum opus, an immersive trip through an abandoned hospital filled with tension, mystery, and fear. I built every detail myself: the crumbling wallpaper, flickering fluorescent lights, rusted gurneys, even the eerie ambient sounds recorded from real-world locations. The simulation was finally stable enough for a full test run. I figured I'd throw on the headset before bed just for a few minutes. Big mistake. The moment the game loaded, I was standing in a dim hospital corridor. Walls stained with age. A wheelchair slowly spinning in place. It was silent. Too silent. My footsteps echoed sharply with every cautious step forward. The realism thrilled me at first. The lighting engine, the spatial sound, everything was working perfectly. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Not mine. I froze. The sound came from somewhere behind me in the hallway. But when I turned, the corridor was empty. I figured maybe I'd left a looping sound effect active, or maybe it was a playback error. Still, something about it felt too real. Then came the giggle. A child. A faint, breathy laugh, like someone stifling it behind cupped hands. It bounced around the corridor unnaturally, too sharp for the reverb I programmed. I spun around. Nothing. Then I saw her. A silhouette at the far end of the hallway. A nurse, I think. The figure flickered like bad reception on an old TV, her form twitching unnaturally. One moment she was there, the next, gone. My pulse quickened. This wasn't in the script. I reached up and tried to bring up the menu, the usual exit command. Nothing happened. My fingers hovered in the air. I tried again. Still nothing. That's when the silhouette reappeared. Above me. On the ceiling. Crawling. My headset sputtered with static. The whole simulation blinked like a dying light bulb. Panic clawed up my spine. I yanked my head to the side. The nurse was gone again. My gaze shifted toward a glass door up ahead, and I saw myself, my own reflection, inside the headset, staring back at me. But something was wrong. My eyes, they were wide open, unblinking, too wide, almost screaming. The hallway behind me suddenly collapsed into shadow. The floor tiles cracked and dropped off into nothingness. I couldn't hear my own footsteps anymore, but I felt something. A cold breath on the back of my neck. I tore off the headset. My hands were shaking. I was back in my home office. Lights on, warm, safe. But the screen. The game still ran. The avatar stood alone beneath a single flickering light in the hospital hallway, motionless. The rest of the corridor swallowed by blackness. I unplugged the system, powered everything down, and stumbled away from my desk. It was just a glitch. I told myself that over and over. A memory leak. A scripting error. Maybe a corrupted asset playing tricks with the sound. I left the equipment right there on the floor and went to bed. But I didn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling, half expecting to see her crawling toward me. And I swore. For just a moment before I shut my eyes, I heard it again. That same soft giggle. From the hallway outside my room. The next morning felt like waking up with frost in my lungs. I barely slept, tossing around in bed with the image of that flickering nurse burned behind my eyelids. Every time I drifted off, I heard that damn giggle again. Faint, mocking, just close enough to feel real. I kept telling myself it was just the game, just code. Still, I walked into the office trying to rationalize it all. Maybe a memory bug. Maybe I'd left some dev triggers running in the background that caused the scare events to loop. It wouldn't be the first time I'd been too tired to test properly. But then, I saw the footprints. Muddy, small, leading across the tiled floor of my studio. They trailed from the front door, which I always keep locked, right up to my desk, then vanished under it. My breath caught in my throat. I don't have kids, no pets, no one has keys, and I live alone. For a long time, I just stood there, staring at the smeared outline of a tiny shoe print, my coffee trembling in one hand. I crouched down, half expecting to find some logical explanation, something I'd missed. But when I reached under the desk, I found something else entirely. A gummy bear, red, slightly sticky, just sitting there between two wires like it had been placed. Offered. I backed away, suddenly aware of the silence in the room. No traffic outside, no hum from the fan, just this heavy, unnatural stillness pressing in. I sat at my desk and booted up my workstation. No strange errors, no corrupted files, just graveyard shift, quietly humming in standby. Around 2 a.m., it had auto-run a diagnostic, something I programmed to happen whenever I wasn't actively testing. But something strange happened during that window. The hallway security cam was offline. I didn't even realize I had a blind spot there until now. It usually records everything, 24/7, for safety, just in case someone tries to break in or something catches fire. But the exact hour I ran the simulation? Black. Just static. No logs. No feed. Like the footage had been wiped or overwritten. Or never recorded at all. I replayed the moments just before the test. Everything looked normal. Me plugging in the headset, checking my phone, rubbing my eyes. But once I slipped the headset on, the file ended. No exit timestamp. No footage of me removing the headset. It was as if once I went in, I never came out. My skin crawled. I stood up, walked down the hallway, and stared at the ceiling camera, blinking red, now recording, watching. And for a brief second, I swore I saw something move in the reflection of the lens, not me. Something smaller. Later that night, I unplugged everything, locked the doors, triple-checked every window, and I sat there in the dark, waiting to hear that giggle again. But nothing came, not that night. Instead, I fell asleep at my desk, and just before I drifted off, Graveyard Shift started running a new process in the background. A silent patch, no update notes, no request for admin access. And this time, it accessed files I didn't know existed. The folder was called Room 306 Backup. I thought updating the code would help. After the gummy bear incident and the blacked-out hallway camera, I convinced myself that the horrors of last night were just corrupted event triggers. A few lines of code gone rogue, maybe some debug scripts left open, common enough in early dev stages. I spent the entire afternoon combing through the back end, patching anything that looked remotely unstable. I rewrote the menu exit logic, cleared the AI spawn triggers, and even disabled the environmental audio system entirely. The nurse? The ceiling crawling? That couldn't have been part of the game. Not intentionally. I didn't program that. I ran a test build, offline mode only, and left it running in a background window while I worked on other tasks. The in-game hospital should have remained static. No AI, no scripts active, just an empty corridor and locked doors. But as I was writing out patch notes, my monitor suddenly flickered. I looked up. The window that displayed the test environment had changed. It wasn't a still frame anymore. It was live, and I was in it, not my avatar. Me. Standing in the center of the hospital hallway, wearing the exact same clothes I had on in real life. Down to the creases in my sleeves. The way my shirt had bunched up from leaning forward. The figure didn't move, just stood there, still, like it was listening. I tapped the keyboard. Nothing. I clicked out of the window. It wouldn't close. My mouse stopped responding. Then the camera in the game began to slowly pan. Not with my input. It moved on its own. Behind the version of me in the corridor, a shape crawled across the far wall. Too fast to be human. Too jagged to be a shadow. Limbs all wrong. It slithered across the floor, its edges rippling like static. As it passed by my in-game self, I heard something. A whisper. Not loud. Not even a full sentence. Just breathy, broken syllables sliding through the speakers. I leaned closer to try and catch it. Ows. The lights in my room cut out. Total black. I froze. The screen was the only glow in the dark. The crawling shadow had disappeared. My virtual self stood alone again, but something shimmered just at the edge of the screen, like the pixels themselves were trying to form a face. Then everything shut down. My PC powered off. So did the backup drive. Even my phone, which wasn't plugged in, went dark. The silence was unreal. For a moment, I thought maybe a circuit blew. But then, without warning, the power returned. Everything booted up again as if nothing had happened. Except for one thing. My monitor stayed black for a few seconds longer than it should have. When it finally came back on, I saw my desktop. Normal. Calm. The test window was closed, but in the reflection of the screen, I saw myself. And for one heartbeat too long, my reflection didn't blink when I did. It stared back, wide-eyed, like it was watching me. Not the other way around. I should have stopped. After the reflection lingered, after the power surge, after seeing myself inside the simulation, I should have walked away, deleted everything, started over. But some part of me, maybe pride, maybe curiosity, refused to let go. Graveyard Shift was supposed to be a game, a product, not whatever this thing was becoming. That night, while combing through system logs, I found it. Buried deep in the environment manager was a room ID I never created. Room 306 true. It was flagged in red, a dev error tag I used to catch non-existent spaces. But this room didn't throw any errors. It compiled fine. The coordinates pointed to a section of the hospital that should have been empty. A wall. No door. No trigger. I ran a debug version of the game in VR, just to see. The moment I loaded in, the temperature in my office dropped again. My breath fogged inside the headset, which made no sense. The simulation doesn't simulate temperature, and the heater was running. I stood in the same corridor as before, now quieter than ever. The overhead lights barely flickered. Then I saw it. At the far end of the hallway, where there had only been a blank wall before, was a door. Plain white. Rusted handle. Stamped in faint black numbers above the frame. 306, I didn't put it there. Not in the environment assets, not in any backup build. I know this code. I know every room I created. But the door was real. At least, as real as anything can be in a simulation. I approached it slowly. The closer I got, the more distorted the ambient audio became. A soft humming, like someone singing to themselves. It was a lullaby. Familiar. Uncomfortably so. The door creaked open with no interaction. I stepped inside. The room was small. A child's hospital bed sat against the left wall. Pale blue sheets. A single pillow stained. Beside it, a nurse's hat lay crumpled on the floor like it had been discarded in a hurry. On the opposite wall, handprints. Dozens of them. Scribbled in faded red like dried paint or something worse. Small. Childlike. Some overlapping. Some reaching toward the ceiling. The humming grew louder. Then it stopped. All at once. The silence hit me like a punch. I tried to open the menu, but nothing appeared. The controls were frozen again. My hands started shaking. The walls began to shimmer, like the textures were struggling to render properly. Then, across the wall in front of me, words appeared in a slow, pulsing font. Don't leave me again. The game crashed. Hard. Not a clean shutdown. A full system freeze. I had to manually reset my PC. When the desktop returned, everything seemed normal, except for one thing. The door in room 306. It was now present in the editor. Not a phantom tag. Not a runtime anomaly. It had embedded itself in my files. As if it had always been there. As if I had simply forgotten. And the worst part? When I listened closely to the recording of the lullaby from the crash log, the audio clip it saved just before freezing, I recognized the voice. It was my mother. I didn't sleep after room 306. I didn't even try. I sat in front of my computer until the sun came up, unable to take my eyes off the codebase. I ran antivirus scans, malware checks, even opened every subfolder in the project to see if anything had been tampered with. I expected corrupted textures, rogue assets, at worst, a virus. Instead, I found a file I didn't create, buried in a hidden folder named /_root/ghost data/. It was just sitting there. Danny.x. I stared at it for nearly 10 minutes, mouse hovering over it like it might bite. My hands felt clammy. I know every file I've ever written, every asset I've imported, and this wasn't one of them. No version history, no author metadata, no timestamp. Just a single 56 megabyte executable named after me. I should have deleted it, but I didn't. I opened it. No loading screen, no UI. It just launched into what looked like a raw camera feed inside the graveyard shift engine. But it wasn't any room I'd built. The resolution was grainy, the lighting dim and flickering. In the center of the screen was a hospital bed, occupied. A boy, maybe 8 or 9, curled up under stained white sheets. His face was pale, his hair messy and wet like he'd just come out of surgery. An IV dripped slowly beside him. His chest rose and fell with soft, shallow breaths. I couldn't look away. Then the crying started. Quiet at first, a soft, choked sob. It grew louder, warped. Like two versions were playing over each other. One high-pitched and childlike, the other deeper, broken, familiar. It was my voice, begging. Please, please don't leave me here. Please. The boy didn't speak, but his body trembled with every sob. As I leaned in closer, I realized his lips were mouthing something silently, over and over. Help me, help me, help me. The screen flickered to static. I tried to quit the program, but my mouse wouldn't move. My keyboard stopped responding. The lights in my room dimmed, humming softly like something massive was drawing power. Then the temperature dropped, so fast it made my breath fog instantly. I could see it, curling from my lips as I stood up, rubbing my arms. And then the headsets turned on. All of them. I had 3 VR headsets plugged into various testing rigs. All 3 powered up at once, lights blinking. Though none were connected to any running instance. The monitors lit up one by one, each showing the same thing. Room 306. Flickering light. The boy's bed. Empty. I yanked the power cable from the wall. Everything went dark. The hum stopped. The cold remained. I stood in that dark room, heart pounding, watching as one of the headsets, the oldest one, barely functioning anymore, powered back on. No cable, no power source, just that same flickering light. I stepped closer and saw it. Not room 306, not the hospital, my home office. Rendered in perfect detail, my desk, my chair, the half-empty coffee cup I'd just put down, and standing in the center of the room, where I should have been, was the boy. He slowly turned toward the camera, and his eyes were mine. I don't remember falling asleep. All I know is that I woke up drenched in sweat, heart pounding, breath caught in my throat. It wasn't morning, not even close. My room was pitch black, no monitor glow, no streetlight leaking through the blinds, just dark. But I wasn't alone. In the dream, or maybe it was something else, I'd been walking a hospital corridor with no end. The walls stretched infinitely on either side, identical rooms repeating like a looping game asset. Each door was numbered the same, 306. Every handle I touched was cold, rusted. Every knob turned but wouldn't open. My footsteps echoed unnaturally, doubling back on themselves like something else was walking beside me. And then she appeared. The nurse. No face. Just smooth, pale skin stretched where her eyes should have been. She didn't walk. She glided. Her feet never touched the floor. Her body twitched like frames were missing in her animation. She followed me through every corridor, never speeding up, never slowing down. Just watching, or sensing. I tried running. The doors flew past me like a blur, but no matter how fast I moved, she stayed right behind me, silent, unblinking. Then suddenly she was gone, and I was standing in room 306 again. Same bed, same walls, same handprints. But this time, someone was lying in the bed. I walked closer. My knees buckled. It was me. A younger version of me, hooked up to a heart monitor, IV in his arm, eyes closed, lips trembling like he was whispering something in his sleep. Behind him, standing in the corner, was the nurse. She slowly raised one finger to her lips. Shh! I jolted awake. The sheets on my bed were torn. My shoulder throbbed. I stumbled into the bathroom, flipped on the light, and froze. 3 long scratches ran down my back. Deep. Dried blood caked around the edges. My fingernails were broken. I didn't remember scratching anything. And I didn't sleepwalk. At least, I never had before. Back at my workstation, I loaded the debug footage from the night before. Just to prove to myself I was still in control, that this was still a game. But the footage showed something else. My VR avatar, which should have been idle, was moving. Not in programmed animations, not in a glitchy loop. It was walking, slowly, methodically. It moved down the hallway of the game hospital, toward room 306, and as it turned the corner, the nurse appeared in frame. She didn't move. She just turned her head toward the camera and stared. Then she mouthed the words, "He remembers now." The footage froze, and then something happened. I can't explain. The avatar turned around, faced the screen, and smiled. My headset wasn't plugged in. The controllers were on the shelf. But the game didn't care. It was playing me now. It was never just a game. I used to believe in logic, in lines of code and structured loops, in bugs that could be squashed and features that could be controlled. But now, I know some systems aren't meant to be debugged. Some are meant to remember, and some refuse to forget. The morning after the avatar smiled at me, after the nurse mouthed those words, I found something that shattered whatever belief I had left in coincidence. A photo album, buried in a dusty moving box I hadn't opened in years, stuffed in the back of my bedroom closet. I wasn't looking for it. It practically fell into my lap while I was searching for my backup drives. The photos inside were old, faded, the kind you'd find in any childhood scrapbook. Birthday parties, playground swings, poorly cut bangs. Then I turned the page, and I saw it. Me, lying in a hospital bed, pale, eyes half open, a cast on my leg, tubes running to my arm. On the wall behind the bed was a small metal sign, room 306. I stared at that number for so long my vision blurred. I had no memory of being hospitalized, no broken leg, no surgeries, no stay in any room with that number. But the evidence was there, in my own handwriting on the back of the photo. Danny, age 7, Mercy Children's Hospital. I felt sick, like something had been clawing at the edge of my brain for weeks and had finally broken through. Later that night, I booted up Graveyard Shift one last time. Except this time, it wasn't the game I'd built. It was my apartment, rendered perfectly inside the game engine. Every photo, every piece of furniture, even the scratch on the floor by the kitchen where I dropped a chair years ago. It wasn't a simulation anymore. It was a reflection. I moved my avatar toward the hallway. In the game, it was exactly as it appeared in real life, except longer. Much longer. At the end of the hallway stood room 306, the door slightly ajar, light spilling through the crack like it was waiting. I tried exiting the game. The menu didn't open, of course. Instead, the avatar opened the door, and inside was the same hospital room from the photos, the same bed, and someone was sitting on it. Not the boy this time. It was me. Older, current, wearing the clothes I had on, but slumped forward, pale, unmoving. A nurse stood behind me, the one with no eyes, gently resting a hand on my shoulder. She looked up at the screen, at me, and finally spoke. "You were never supposed to leave." Every light in my apartment cut off at once. My computer shut down. My phone screen went black. I yanked out power cords, tore the router from the wall, but it didn't matter. When I restarted the PC, Graveyard Shift was already running. No icon, no executable, just running. No matter how many times I delete the files, wipe the hard drives, replace the hardware, it comes back. Each time stronger, each time more familiar. Like it's learning, like it knows me better than I know myself. Sometimes at night, I hear the nurse humming, I'll wake up to see the VR headset glowing on the floor. One time, I found it beside my bed, powered on, flickering with that same dim hallway light. And now, I'm afraid to sleep. Because in the dream, I always end up back in room 306. And each time I do, the version of me lying in the bed looks more awake,